Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Only in America, it seems, can foreign conflicts cause people here to come to blows. For example, it's odd to see Ukraine flags flying where American flags won't here in Southern California. So there appears to be some level of catharsis and projection going on when the more political-minded start to use abstract categories to vent their very real frustrations, and it has very real costs as well. Our next guest tonight dives into some of the psychology driving our foreign policy and presidential debates. He writes in the pages of Unheard in part, quote, "In today's globalized world, identity-based existence, mudding the boundaries between the political and the personal, has become a poor man's substitute for the deep-rooted and embodied meaning that was previously derived from communal, traditional life and held in common within a culture. Stemming from an external locus of control, all modern identities thus reflect what Nietzsche called an inherent ressentimental drive and are constructed around overcoming the systemic oppression of an abstract and highly symbolic us by a privileged them that is subsequently cast as evil. In this metaphysical account, being downtrodden is morally superior. Privilege and power are inherently evil, and one can become righteous by projecting oneness or identity with the virtuous victim. In both Israel and Ukraine, we can see how this ontological, if tragic, struggle for coherence within the modern self through self-identification with the disempowered is carried over into the realm of global geopolitics. Regardless of the actual historical context of the globalized conflicts and the ostensible animosity between the partisans of the two sides, the underlying motivation for the opposite sides of these seemingly binary and zero-sum conflicts who don't actually experience the war and its violence is a contestation over oppression and a struggle to determine the virtuous victim. In other words, real wars over land, resources, and survival are co-opted by the rest of the world and transformed into wars of victimhood with which they can intrinsically relate. War thus becomes therapeutic and is turned inward as yet another means for identity formation in one's internal quest for social identity," end quote. Joining us now to discuss is Arta Moini, the research director of the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy and the founding editor of Aegon magazine. Arta, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
Great. So you also write in this piece that what I just discussed a moment ago, that excerpt from your article, is an unusual development, you say, historically speaking, and that it appears also to be pathological. Can you talk to us, to the audience, about the strange phenomenon that you're seeing play out for us real time?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my point in the article was to really discuss something that has been happening repeatedly, and this is this fascination that we have with wars, and we keep going into these foreign entanglements, foreign interventions. And on the one hand, we have our leaders that are invested in these kinds of ideological struggles over with foreign conflicts, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Israel. These countries emerge as a kind of a proxy. Ideological proxy, because they come to represent sort of the global American empire. They come to represent the liberal order with which the leaders are affiliated or feel attachment. So there's a kind of ideological attachment there between the leadership and or the establishment and these proxy ideological nations from their perspective. But then we have another phenomenon, which is also is the other side of this, which we need to be careful of, which is how the civilian populations, the masses, if you will, also come to internalize these faraway conflicts, these wars that are distant, as part of their own, struggle for meaning, effectively, and an identity formation. So we have a crisis of meaning in most modern societies that stems from the modern move to go to war against the family, to go to war against real communities, to go to war against things that used to give us meaning. And in response, we have substituted identity and identity quests for that sort of substantive embodied meaning